Come, spellweavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin' Bones, where we make old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard. I am the R in OSR, and joining us this evening is someone you should definitely be following on Twitter. His takes are always great to see. You can see him on Natural Ones, usually on Tuesdays right before the show with Victor Gorchev. If you guys have interacted with him online, you already know that he's brilliant. A real-life shooter, a hooker, if you will, if you know the terminology. But ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Crossface to Rollin' Bones.
Hey, thank you. Actually, that was probably one of the better introductions anybody's ever given me. I didn't even get a best man speech at my wedding, so thank you.
No problem at all. I love giving people solid introductions here.
Yeah, it was very good. I didn't expect any of that, actually. That was really good. I've watched your show before I even interacted with you a while ago. It was you interviewed Tulanian for Hyperborea. Yeah. That was really cool. At the time, no one was really interviewing him when I watched that, so that was pretty cool. Anyway, I was already kind of like a minor fan of the show before I ever interacted with you, so.
Sweet. I'm glad to hear it, and especially when it comes to Jeff Tulanian, because, I mean, he's brilliant too. Hyperborea is a fantastic game. I love that guy. He's amazing.
Yeah, what he's done with Hyperborea, actually kind of ties into a little bit what we're going to talk about today. But, Hyperborea, I think, is a game that's like very fine-tuned, and it really hits a lot of notes that I think, for me particularly, I really enjoy the game. So,
Absolutely. Well, we're going to kick this off the way we always kick this off. I've got questions that everyone gets asked when they come on Rollin' Bones, so let's begin here at the beginning. How did you get into role-playing games?
Oh, man. Specifically role-playing games, if we're going to take away all the video game stuff. I used to go to like bookstores, and so I was never allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons or even entertain Dungeons and Dragons as a kid. If I ever had like graph paper and I tried to even draw out a map, my dad was like, "Don't do that." So, specifically, like I would go into like Borders or something like that, and at the time it was like 3rd edition books, and I would just kind of like window shop and look at them, and so that kind of as soon as I become like old enough to kind of start doing my own thing, around the time 4th edition came out. So I bought 4th edition and didn't play that much because my friends at the time were like, they didn't like the changes. They didn't want to play the game. So we only played a little bit. And then whenever 5th edition changed over, I just kind of started playing a ton. So that's pretty much it. Like I didn't really have a long storied history of playing when I was a kid because I wasn't allowed. So pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I transitioned my love of gaming from after 5th edition, and that's the reason actually I got into all the older games, is because after 5th edition came out, we played it a lot, but like there was always something that was kind of like missing for me. Mm-hmm. So like I started looking at all this other stuff, and actually that's why I've actually kind of had a longer stint playing older games than I had playing 5th edition, honestly, because I transitioned pretty quickly. We did play a ton of 5th edition, but I quickly was like, this is something that I need, something different. I don't know. So,
Shauner, when you schedule a stream on YouTube, I'm sure you know this, you've done this before, you only get 10-minute increments. I'd like to set the start time as 7:50, but that's too early, and then I start streaming late. So, I don't really have a lot of options. I put 8 o'clock because that's when the stream goes live. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, man. I
don't know anything about that.
It's a 4-minute countdown. I'm sorry. What can I do? Anyway, sorry, that kind of stuff just that
you're good.
It's one of those things like Bobby Boucher, the medulla oblongata, just bothers me. But
so yeah, that was pretty much it for me. That was my introduction. I mean, I played like, if you want to consider video games, like obviously like Link to the Past and Super Nintendo, Morrowind on the Xbox. That was like the most influential, probably, two that I can remember off the top of my head, like Fable on the Xbox, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you're just a couple years older than me, so for people of our generation, a lot of our introduction to RPGs is through games like Fable. I had a PlayStation, not an Xbox, so I didn't play Fable, but I knew a lot of people who did. Skyrim was huge when I was in high school. That's where a lot of us kind of enter the role-playing field, is through role-playing video games.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not even a big video game head or anything like that, but I just remember the first time I played like Morrowind, or the first time I played Link to the Past, and I remember in Super Nintendo, like when you yank the sword when you get the Master Sword, and stuff changes when you go to the future and Link to the Past, and just different things. Like, I don't know, it just was really impactful to me, and sometimes I try to I carry that over to D&D as best I can, to try to like have impactful moments without forcing them, so yeah.
Now, the next question I want to ask you before we get into tonight's topic, I like to get everyone's take on this, because we do this because we love it. There's not a lot of money in role playing, so we do it out of a love for the game, and that comes from fond memories. So I know this is a hard question for a lot of people, but Crossface, if you had to pick a fondest RPG memory, what would that be?
Oh my good lord. Honestly, just because it's fresh, I'm going to talk about this. I'm running a D&D club for the local high school now, and whenever I put them in tough moments, not on purpose, just because I'm running the game as it should be ran, sometimes tough moments happen, and whenever those kids roll, and we roll in the open, so whenever those kids roll on those desks and it hits, and the dice clanks and it hits a 20, and I see just the pure joy in these kids' faces, and they jump and scream like it's a movie and stuff, like, honestly, that's probably the peak. I don't think there's anything more than that you could really want to have out of a game. Is just peak joy of like a junior high kid. I don't know. That's probably what my top moment is, honestly.
Yeah, it's always fun to watch people experience that for the first time. Just that sensation of, natural 20.
Well, it's specifically in dire moments. This one time, this kid is his first game. I told the story on One Shots, but it's worth telling. It was his first game. He's playing a paladin. They go up against this snake guardian statue thing, and they shouldn't have been fighting it, but they pushed forward and fought it anyway. This kid is smacked down. Everybody's making death saves because everybody got smacked. Like, they shouldn't have been fighting this thing. So everybody's rolling on the table. They're making death saves. And this one kid who's playing the paladin, first time he's ever played, he rolls a 20. And then in 5th edition, when you roll a 20, you pop back up with 1 HP.
Yep.
Pops back up with 1 HP. So whenever they're making their death saves, I made the mistake, because I thought they were all dead. I made the mistake of telling them that I was like, you had him down to like 9 HP. I think it's what I told them. And they're like, oh man. And then he rolls a natural 20, and they freak out. And he gets up and he looks around. It's his first time he's played. So he's like, what should I do? And the other kids are like, charge it and kill it. It's only got 9 HP. So he charges it and kills it. And so I re-roll initiative. He wins initiative. He hits it, 7 HP down. So they got 2 HP left.
Mm-hmm.
The snake turns to him, and I roll. I don't do a DM screen. I do a natural 20. And the snake hits him and does double his max health damage, so instant death.
Oh.
And he's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, you really thought you had the movie moment, man. He's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's just stuff like that. It's like really good memories just because the kids, like, first time playing and he had a moment like that. I don't know. You can't really, that's the peak. I pretty much told him there's no going up from here, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll only ever match this moment. You'll never exceed it.
Yeah, for sure. If he would have killed the thing, maybe if he rolled another 20, he'd have been the hero for life, but whatever.
Mm-hmm. Or even if he'd like put a smite into it, he might have been able to overcome.
Yeah, he was level
but
1, so they get that at level 2. Mm-hmm. So he was just like, yeah, that would have been really cool. He has done a smite and got critical damage before on smites and stuff since, because he re-rolled another paladin after he died. He's playing his character's son. Yeah,
that's the way to go.
Yeah, so like some stuff like that, because playing with these kids, like playing with your adult friends, sometimes they're kind of jaded, and you still have fun and it's a good time, but it's a little different. But playing with these kids who've never played before, you really hit the nail on the head there, like seeing these people experience things for the first time and with such joy and stuff. Like I think that's the peak for gaming for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we now have to move on to some stuff that's some stupidity, because as the title of this episode, which I'd just like to take a minute to pat myself on the back for thinking of calling this episode Tuesday Night Raw.
Oh, that's sweet.
So
that's really cool.
That's where we're at tonight, because one of the tweets that you first of all, let me back up a little bit. You have an excellent Twitter. The way that you use Twitter, I love it, because you're always posting just really cool looking medieval art. There's all kinds of great content that I see just kind of cross your Twitter feed. And one of the things that you kind of started a fight over was this concept of running games, not even necessarily rules as written, but just with a knowledge of the rules and the structure of the game. And somehow this has become a controversial issue in gaming. So tell us a little bit about that side of things and how that kind of blew up in your face, or not necessarily blew up in your face, but how that caused an argument on Twitter.
So I guess, that specific moment. Okay, I think I remember now. That specific moment, because this has been an ongoing thing with me. But that one specific last time, it was a meme that there's the D&D meme pages, and some of them are good memes pages, and some of them aren't. This one, I don't know if it's a good one or not, but I happened to see this thing, and it was like the truth of all DM whatever, and they open it up, and it says, "Just make it up." And I'm like, that's really bad advice, because if you want to be good at making a game last, or if you want to be good at something, you don't just make it up. You read and you try to implement what you learned, and then you don't always hit it out of the park every time, and you're not perfect every time, but you go in and you try to do your best, you move the game forward, then you go back, you reread, you relearn, and then you go back to the table with better knowledge. And basically all I was trying to say is, this is bad advice. Don't just make everything up, try to learn and get better over time, and then you'll run a better game. And that's pretty much the gist of what I said. And man, I got called a gatekeeper. It was like a big deal. Actually, there was a game designer that does World of Darkness stuff.
Of course.
He's like, as a game designer of X amount of years and all these books behind you, and behind me, and all this stuff, he said, this isn't CrossFit, just make it up. And I'm like, bro, I don't even do CrossFit. I'm sorry. It's like, what are you trying to say? I'm in shape and I like to work out. Like, oh man, sick burn. But like, I was like, what does this have to do with anything? And so I got called a gatekeeper by some other kid. Man, it blew up, and I don't even know why it blew up, like you said, because I'm kind of I'm baffled too.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I think I honestly don't even really know. I think it has to do with how people just kind of like view or just run their lives in general. Like some people just don't want to do things the way that other people tell them to do it. They just want to do things their own way, and they think if you are telling them to do things some other way, that you're a bad person. And I don't know. I pretty much think that's the gist of it. But essentially, if I told you, hey, when you play the board game Sorry, it doesn't have Monopoly money, you would be like, screw you, man. I'm going to play Monopoly money when I play the board game Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you okay? Like, that's pretty much what I got from that.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the expense of sounding pretentious 2 episodes in a row, I want to read a quote here. This is a quote from G.K. Chesterton, specifically his 1929 book, The Thing, which does not have anything to do with Clobberin' Time, unfortunately, but this is a very appropriate quote to what we're talking about here. So if you'll allow me just a couple minutes here. There exists in such a case certain institution or law, let us say for the sake of simplicity, a fence or gate erected across a road. The more modern type of reformer goes gaily up to it and says, I don't see the use of this, let us clear it away. To which the more intelligent type of reformer will do well to answer, if you don't see the use of it, I certainly won't let you clear it away. Go away and think, then, when you can come back and tell me that you do see the use of it, I may allow you to destroy it.
Yeah, I feel that. I understand. It's actually very appropriate. Very appropriate. I did not know about that quote. That is very appropriate. There's this. So we were talking briefly before we went live here that I used to do martial arts and wrestling and different things. It's a similar thing in martial arts and MMA and stuff and jiu-jitsu, whatever, that there will be people who don't know that they are ignorant. Mm-hmm. And I use that term dictionarily, ignorant. Like they just don't know what they don't know. And they'll do a thing and they'll say, I invented X, or I did this, or this is a good thing. And I'm not going to listen to what the coach told me to do here because I did this thing instead and it's better. But they don't know why that thing is there in the first place that the coach is trying to tell them to do. So you can apply that same concept to gaming. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of modern gamers who came into the game in the past 5 years. And they'll go to a game like OSE. And they'll say, okay, I like playing OSE, except I don't like this one thing about it. I'm going to do this instead. Meanwhile, they've never even tried to play the game in the first place the way it was supposed to be played.
Yeah.
So they're trying to change something that they don't even have the rank to really change. Like, that's not the right word, but they don't have the experience. Mm-hmm. So in wrestling, one of my coaches in the past, I think I was tore up over something online or something. Maybe somebody was trying to run my team down. I can't remember. But he said, whenever somebody says something critical, you should ask yourself, what have they won or who have they coached? Has the people they coach, have they won anything or not? So basically, in that same, if you can apply that same thought process to gaming, mm-hmm. you would say, who is this person criticizing this game? What have they done? Yeah. Have they even played the game long enough to even know left or right? Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And the 99% of the time, they haven't done anything. And for whatever reason, there's this phenomenon in gaming, in D&D gaming, where it's like people want to make up these new mechanics or these new way to do things, and they're trying to fix something that don't need fixed. Yeah. And they would actually, if they go, like, to go back and reference your quote, if they would go away, think about it for a while, experience it, yeah, then come back with the knowledge, they might be able to see why it's useful for in the first place, or at least at that point they'll be more educated about why they don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those. It's one of these things. one of the biggest consequences of the modern popularity of role-playing games is there are a lot of people who want to be a part of the conversation. They want to talk about gaming, but they don't actually ever play the game. They're the debutantes of, or dilettantes rather, of role-playing games. And so there's a lot of RPG theoreticians out there that don't have a lot of practical experience actually rolling dice, actually running games, and even the ones that do don't have a lot of experience running games beyond the standard 6 sessions that we hear so much about being the average for modern campaign lengths. So when it comes to that, a lot of these mechanics that they're complaining about, they've never had a chance to actually use in a real table situation. It's just something that they're not understanding, that's not clicking with them in their minds, that they haven't actually tried to dissect, try to go through, try to understand why the mechanic exists in this game the way that it does. And so they just go, we're going to throw that out and, just kind of make stuff up to go along with it, which we'll get into some of the, kind of other side of this conversation in a little bit. But when you're doing that as someone who hasn't run a lot of games, you're inevitably going to end up in a situation where you have to continuously break your game, ruling by ruling, as you kind of work around this slapdash system that you erected in place of something that a game designer with experience who's actually run this game for people at a table set up themselves without trying to understand why their thought process took them to this particular mechanic as being the one most appropriate to this game.
Yes, actually, you're kind of speaking my language. This is actually something I rant about a lot on One Shots. I know that you do a show right after me and Victor's show, so you don't get to see it. But I rant about this specific topic quite a bit. The fact that people do not run games enough. Mm-hmm. And 90% of people's problems with gaming or whatever, it gets solved if they just play more game. It will work itself out. Like this OGL stuff. And we're not going to talk about that, but the fact that there was a big deal, and it was a big deal. I don't, screw Wizards, still screw Wizards, still, whatever. But don't let them take away the game from you. Just because Wizards try to screw you over doesn't mean you need to stop playing 5th edition because that's your home game. Now all of a sudden, you don't want to play anymore because they did. No, the way through that is just to still play more games. Yeah. If you let them take away your ability to run games at your house, they won. So a lot of people, for whatever reason, like you said, they want to. There's 2 or 3 different people who are online personalities with D&D. The one that I like the most is the people who talk about the games they run and they report back what they found from running games. But the other side of that is normally people are just theorizing, or they might play 2 games, and since they played 2 games of this one system, but they ran it this way, they like that way better, and they think you should do that too. It's who are you, man? Don't tell me to change something about my game just because you think it's cool. What have you done significantly in gaming to tell me how to run my game at my table? Just because I'm running it rules as written, you think that's lame. And you need to tell me about it. That's happened so much when I tell people that I run games, the rules is written. They're like, yeah, or you could run it like this because it's stupid to run it rules is written. I'm like, no. Mm-hmm. So that happens so much.
Crafty in chat here brings up a good point. He says the modern gamer is one of these: a failed writer, a failed actor, a failed artist. And yeah, I mean, you run across all 3 types. Whatever actual play you watch, or whoever you encounter on Twitter, inevitably you find someone who's kind of a quote unquote fantasy writer of some description who might have one ebook online that's if you look into it, it's not really all that good, or they post all kinds of just crappy pseudo anime style character art on their Twitter, or something like that. They really want to be a movie star or a voice actor, and inflict all of their worst character ideas on their fellow players at their table. You run into all types of these people, and it's, you know, you see this in every industry. The people with the most ignorant opinions on like music are crappy musicians. In the martial arts world, you see people with all kinds of just terrible takes on stuff, like on MMA fights, who are, you know, they've never thrown a punch, they've never thrown a kick, they probably can't even do a push-up. A lot of these people who are, you know, saying some of the most loud but ignorant stuff about, you know, what pick an MMA fighter is doing. You know, you see the same thing in pro wrestling as well, but it's a lot of talkers. It's not a lot of doers, because doers, if they disagree, they're just going to disagree and do their own thing. And if they're correct, their thing's going to be more successful, probably. So, you know, I feel like that's a lot of what this discourse is a lot of people who have failed at doing stuff just arguing back and forth with each other.
Yeah, I ignore most of it. That's actually something that I'm just kind of venting it out on a new podcast. But that's, like I said, I talk about this a lot with Victor. Another one that you see is the cosplayer. There's a lot of cosplayers who think they're authorities on D&D. And a lot of it is because of the Critical Role. I hate bashing Critical Role too much. It's not that I enjoy what they do, but I think it's just like a cliche to bash them at this point. But the people who want to copy them are like, you can't find good actual plays online, because everybody just wants to be Critical Role, because they do want to be voice actors. They want to be actual actors. Like, man, they did the resurgence of G4 TV.
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, whatever it was, last year. And they had an actual play of D&D on the show, or on the whatever, maybe their YouTube. And it was going to be like live acting. And I turned it on the first episode, and it was just like these people standing in the middle of the stage, and they were acting out what their characters were doing back and forth. And it was almost like, whose line is it anyway? Yeah. Except like not comedy. It was like, what is this? And I just turned it off after 5 minutes, and I was just like, I just can never watch an actual play of D&D ever again. It's like, it's ruined for me.
Yeah. Yeah, but one of the things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, that's the thing, is like when people watch D&D, or they think about D&D and they come into the game, that's the first thing they see. It's on G4 TV, so of course that's what D&D is. Like, no, that's not what it is. Like, you know, and then so I'm usually on the other end of things, and then I say things like, hey guys, play the game itself. Don't worry about all this other stuff. Just play the game. And then all these cosplayers and all these failed actors and stuff, they get so upset, and then they just put you on a blockchain, and then, you know, you're blocked by 1 million people because you told them just to play the game, you know?
Yeah. And Crafty points this out in chat, and you've already hinted at this as well, but part of the reason why these people are failures is they have not comprehended the actual rules of you know, acting or art or fantasy writing or whatever it is, but especially in the world of role-playing, they have not comprehended the rules of the games that they're trying to play. But they still want to participate because it's something that's popular. So they are breaking things apart and kind of rebuilding them to fit their strengths, in heavy air quotes, for those of you who are listening to this rather than watching it. And if they want to do that themselves and they're actually having fun doing it just kind of by themselves, that's fine, but they're not doing that. They're then coming to people like me or like Crossface or like the Basic Expert and saying that because we insist on actually maintaining the structure that's supposed to be present in these role-playing games, that are games, the game part's important. You have to have rules. Because we insist that games have to have rules, we're somehow wrong, or we're, you know, they want to throw around the word gatekeeper like it's a bad thing. Yes. And you know, I know you have no patience for these people anymore. I'm to the point now, I have no patience for this anymore. if you don't want to play the rules, then you're not going to play the game. You're just playing pretend with your friends. You might as well be on the playground playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, correct. And actually, I had this thought today, that I used to play Magic the Gathering, not like competitively or anything, but like enough that I kept up with a lot of stuff. And there's actions and things that you can play in that card game that you have to know how the rules interact with one another, because that is a competitive 1-versus-1 card game where it's still like you're interacting with the rules themselves to create something. Now, I don't like Munchkin stuff within 5th edition or 3.5 or Pathfinder, where you mold the rules into becoming this superhero at level 1. I think that is a totally different conversation, but I think that's a failure of modern gaming, in my opinion, that allows that. But anyway, I think that if you take that same mindset and you apply it to a game like Rule Cyclopedia, Old School Essentials, Hyperborea, and you take that mindset about knowing the rules, knowing how they interact, and then interacting with the game world, if you take that same mindset and play the game that way, I think that's pretty much like you can basically just the same way you become a better card player, a game player with Magic the Gathering, you can become a better player in the game, and that way actually you'll challenge your DM or you'll challenge your other players to become better as well, because you guys are playing so regularly. And then at that point you're having such a high level of a game, as like you can have stories, like you'll actually have stories of like this weird thing happening, or that at that point you're going to have such high level interaction in the game itself that you're going to have like you're playing basically it's the opposite of the rule of cool and all this Critical Role stuff. And that's basically why I don't like that stuff, is because it is just so hand wavy. And it's like, yeah, when I talk to like normies out in the real world who just like they watch like YouTube videos like these crazy, I heard this one story about this happening in D&D game, and it's always like the weirdest stuff. Like I was playing this vampire and I had an eye patch on and had a mirror in the eye patch so I could see behind me. Like that's the silliness. Like, what are you talking about? Like, just random stuff. And it's basically two completely different games at that point. Like you have some people who just want to play act, like we were talking about, and then you have other people who want to play a game. So, that's pretty much why I am so heavy into wanting to play by the rules, because I think that first off, my time's valuable. And then second off, like I want to play a game. I don't want to play acting. If I wanted to play Whose Line Is It Anyway, I could just like go grab a beer and hang out with my friends at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, Crafty's on fire tonight with his saying points before we get around to them. The reason why the rules are so important is structure creates this atmosphere where you have to creatively think, how do I overcome this problem within the given circumstances that I have that are these rules? So a lot of modern creatives, and you see this, the best example of this, in my opinion, is when you watch a show that was previously on regular TV that has had a streaming revival. On regular TV, there are restrictions, there are rules, there's commercial breaks that you have to work around with the structure of your episodes, there are certain time slots you have to fit in, and there are content restrictions on what you can and cannot do on network or cable TV. You see a lot of shows that had to work within those boundaries, and they created something brilliant. Then they're brought over onto a streaming service where there's no time slot restrictions, there's no minimum number of episodes you have to deliver, and there's no restrictions on content, and things start to fall apart creatively, and it's not the same show that you remember. That's because those rules were making the writers exercise their creative muscles more than just saying, no, you can do whatever you want. That's why rules are important, because they create situations where players go, all right, I can't do this, or this. what can I do to overcome this problem? And that's where you get into role-playing games actually challenging the mind of the player rather than the sheet that they have in front of them. Because then you have to work in tandem with the rules to create a solution that, basically allows your character to fight another day.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I've actually been one of my favorite things to tell players that I haven't played with a lot that I just start playing. Like, cause I run a lot of tables. Strangely enough, like I don't know why, but I have a lot of different circles that I used to run in, and they all are a little separate. But I run D&D for all of them. I think I've counted since like 2018. I've introduced like 25 people to playing D&D.
Yeah.
And it's just all separate tables. And one of the things I tell the players is that I don't play toward your character. I don't run games towards your characters. I actually just kind of run games toward you. Like, so I'm going to put you in a situation where you have to use your brain. That's basically what I'm trying to get at. Like, even just going back to the story I talked about the kids, about when the guy rolled the 20, he popped up and he looked around and he said, "What do I do?" And that was a moment where he had to figure out what he wanted to do, not what his character would have done. He was wondering, what do I do? And that is really what it comes down to, in my opinion. The big difference between like what the modern gamer expects out of 5th edition versus what the old school gamers expect is that, like you're saying, one is more challenging the player to use their brain, figure out the ways around the situation. And a lot of the modern gamer is like, what button do I push on my character sheet to win the situation?
Yeah.
Which is a completely different thing, So.
And that's why lethality in role-playing games is so important at early levels, because it's like, I've made this comparison several times. It's like Dark Souls, not Dark Sun. Dark Souls. You die a lot early on because you're learning how to not die. And so eventually you get that character build that you want, and you don't make all the stupid mistakes that you made up until this point, and then you actually get to advance and see all the great things that the game has to offer.
So then, just to run with this analogy, because I haven't actually played Dark Souls, but I'm peripherally aware enough to know what's going on here. But to run with this analogy, imagine there was a nerfed mode of Dark Souls, and you would go online and you were like, man, I really love Dark Souls. And then all these players who played only on the nerf mode were like, yeah, man, I beat Dark Souls in like 6 hours, easy peasy, easy clap, no deaths. And then you're like, bro, no, I actually played real Dark Souls. Like, we're not talking about the nerf Dark Souls here.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel the majority of the time that I talk about D&D online, or not anymore because I've kind of cultivated a good group of people, but just with the regular crowd of D&D in general, especially in real life, or just the normie crowd. If someone learns I play D&D, they're like, oh, X, blah, blah, blah. I'm always just like, yeah, but you didn't really, you had a DM that just wanted you to see you jump across a 30-foot chasm, and you rolled a 20, and you did like the splits when you got over there, and you stabbed the monster in the gut and won the, it's like, cool, man, the DM let you do that, but that's not how things really work,
Right.
Now,
on a kind of on the other side of rules as written, I kind of want to talk about some of the benefits of, running a little bit more of a loose game, because when we first kind of interacted with each other, I remember our first interactions not being like contentious, but we disagreed a little bit because, and this, I will say from my end, it was purely because I misunderstood what you were saying, and I had to actually dig into what you were saying and realize, okay, yeah, we actually do agree with each other. We're just saying it differently. I think it's healthy for a GM to be essentially the final authority on what does or does not happen at the table, rather than necessarily the rule book. So it's ultimately down to the ruling of the GM and the systems that the GM wants to use. That said, before you start going, okay, we're going to play D&D, but we're going to use this mechanic from Earth Dawn, and we're going to use this mechanic from Rule Cyclopedia, but we're not playing Rule Cyclopedia, we're playing 5e. We're going to use this mechanic from OSE. Before you do that, you have to understand how 5th edition D&D works, and then start seeing if, okay, well, I don't like how it does this. If I slot in weapon mastery from Rule Cyclopedia instead of what this has here, is that going to, break anything in the 5e rule set? And if the answer is yes, then you probably should just play Rule Cyclopedia. If the answer is no, then go ahead and add it in. Would you agree that that's kind of a good way to approach things?
Okay, so I guess, let me see. It really depends on how long the DM and the group have played together, for one. Yeah. If they've played together for a really long time, and you guys have already given it a good go to play this system, and you gave it a good go to play this system, you've tried to actually play these systems and not just be like, oh, we're playing OSE, but actually we're going to play 5th edition initiative, and actually we're going to do the death saves from 5th edition, but we're playing OSE. I think so. The problem is with the DM being the final say, and I do agree that the DM has the final say. Mm-hmm. The problem is with that being an understood norm is that you're going to get crappy DMs that are just egotistical narcissists that they're the opposite of the rules lawyers. They're like the rules lawyers that became DMs, and they're like, well, I'm the DM and I have the ultimate say here. So, and so the thing is so say I'm a player and the DM has that mentality, but I'm going into this situation where I have to know the structure of what if I'm playing in a challenging game and I know the structure, I'm going to make risky calls on how my character is going to advance, and I might die, and I'm going to accept that. Yeah. But say I know the structure and I do the thing and I do it right, and I know that I did it right, and the DM's like, nah, you didn't do it right. At that moment, that's bad.
Yeah,
that sets a crappy precedent moving forward. And the problem is with the DM having the final say as well is that there's so much bias that can happen. Their girlfriend might be playing at the table, and they always let the girlfriend slide, but they don't let this person slide. And then also, I'm telling you where the worst case scenarios.
Oh yeah.
Also, those kind of DMs also tend to play with the screens and also tend to fudge rolls. This actually goes to a video that I just watched the other day, and I don't hate watch much, but I do hate watch this one YouTuber.
Is it XP to level 3?
Yeah. Yes. Actually, yes. And so I watched that. I watched him the other day, and I haven't watched him for a minute. But every once in a while, I'm at home by myself. It's very rare I'm home by myself. But I'm like, I'm going to watch XP to level 3, and so I go to his YouTube, and he has this YouTube like how to be a Giga Chad DM or something like that.
Yep.
And at the very end of that episode, he's like, "Do you really want to know how much HP the boss had?" And they're like, "Yeah, I want to know." He's like, "It's going to change everything." And then he's like, I don't even count HP when it comes to bosses. I just let people do all their cool stuff, and then after I feel like everybody got a good shot in and they do their cool stuff, then the boss fight's over. But you can't let it change anything. I'll see you next week. And I'm like, this is the cringiest thing. Yeah. And so that is the worst case scenarios. However, the reason I'm so against, I say provocative stuff. Yeah. The reason I say that is because I challenge people to think about it. But the reason I'm so against the culture of the DM having the final say is because in modern gaming culture, they're going to watch XP to level 3 and they're going to be like, man, the boss monsters, they don't even need to have HP. You just let the players do the cool thing and then they win. And I'm like, yeah, that's not it, So that is where I'm coming from. And I only briefly remember our interaction, actually, that you mentioned this. But I do remember it. I don't remember the exact context. But that is the spirit of where I was coming from. Is talking about the XP level 3 people who don't even have HP for monsters.
Yeah, and a lot of that I feel like comes down to again, it's a cliche at this point, but with GMs, it's the Spider-Man rule. With great power comes great responsibility. And that responsibility that comes along with being the ultimate arbiter of the game world, and you have the final say in what happens. That responsibility is to treat your players fairly, so that if they haven't violated the rules, if everything they've done fits within the framework of the game you're playing, there's no reason to make a judgment against them, and also to treat your players, treat everyone the same way. Don't have different standards for different players. Treat everyone the same way. Be consistent with your rulings and know the rules of the game that you're playing, and be consistent with the rules that you're playing. So if you have a situation where you've grafted, just as an example, the one that you use, the death save system from 5e onto OSE, along with weapon mastery from Rule Cyclopedia and other mechanics. Make sure your players, before the game even starts, know these are the rules that we're playing with. Here's the reference material that you need to work within this particular rule set, and know that I will be arbitrating the rules based on these documents here that I provided for you. So again, I do think we agree with this. It's just you have to, as a GM, and this is, I harp a lot on players doing stupid things, so this is going to be me harping on GMs doing stupid things here for a little bit. You have to take that responsibility on if you're going to essentially be the god of your campaign world, as people like Alex McCrease like to say, that you're the arbiter of worlds. It's not all power. There's responsibility that comes with it. So you have to, take on the fact that GMs have the most work to do and have to know the rules inside and out. That's the game. That's what you've agreed to do when you agree to GM. So you're absolutely right that so many GMs just think about the power aspect of whatever I say goes, without thinking of that means I have to be fair in my rulings and have to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so to kind of scale this back to your side and to agree with what you're saying here, is that there has been situations where in the moment, I wasn't in the moment, you're not for sure what the rule is. And then, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. You got to go back and learn what that stuff is after the game. But in the moment, if you don't know what the rule is, just make a ruling. Unless it's a super crucial moment when everybody's cool to take a pause for 1 minute. I know it's a big no to look at the books when at the table, but I'm going to be controversial and say it's okay in crucial moments to be like, hey guys, let's pause for a second. Let's look up the actual rule. Yeah. And then we're going to move forward, because this is a crucial moment and I just want to get this right. It's okay to do that. I do it a lot. I'm very transparent with my players on hey, if we want to do this right, and this is going to be a big moment, so I want to make sure that I get splash damage of this Molotov cocktail correct. You might wipe out a whole goblin gang, so I want to make sure we get this right. And then my players are actually very cool with that. They're like, yeah, I want to know if I did it right or not. And so if you have a culture from the very beginning of being hey, I'm going to try to be the master of the rules, but I'm not going to know everything, and sometimes we're going to look it up. And also, I want you guys to know the rules as well, because it helps me out whenever I don't know exactly what's going on to make the game flow better. But I was in a situation in this high school D&D club early on where this guy showed up. He's an older brother of one of the other players, and he pretty much tried to he was a DM he was actually probably a DM that we're talking about, but he wasn't he was 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And he basically is oh, I thought I was going to DM today, but he sat down, he made a character real fast at my table, and he's I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do, and he was trying to tell me how to DM. And I was at that moment, I was I pulled my Rolling Bones with Ryan hat, put that hat on. I was nah, I'm the DM here, man. What I say goes.
Yeah.
And so yes, every once in a while you have to take authority of the table, because you can't let especially a kid, but you can't let a new player just run the table for you.
Right.
You got to be like, listen, I don't care that you think you know what these rules are. This is what we're going to do right now because this is my table. But like I said, if you've been playing together for a really long time, it's a whole different situation. You'll never have that really happen. But playing these open tables where you're just playing with strangers, like, you have to command that authority, because if the players are going to show up and run over you, then you'll never get the respect of the other players. So you have to command the respect, and then scale it back and let the players have a good time, So
now the other issue that I feel like a lot of players run into with modern games, as far as rules as written goes, when you have so many different books out there, all filled with different kinds of rules and different things that fundamentally change the way the game is played. Now, this isn't a problem if you're running something like OSE, or if you're running something like RC or Basic Fantasy, or something. With a lot of those, you have like one or two books, or in the case of OSE, you've got a handful of pamphlet-sized books. But with stuff like 5e or Pathfinder 2e, you've got so many different splat books and so many different rule supplements and so many different adventures to pull, character concepts and items from. A lot of times, the rules lawyery type of players that have gone over every single book to basically find the most broken character they can possibly create will sit down at a 5e game and say, well, I've pulled this from Tasha's, I pulled this from Xanathar's, I pulled this from Sword Coast, and I know like Tasha's makes those other two redundant, so Tasha's breaks everything in 5th edition. I've come to believe that very strongly now. But those kinds of players will say, well, this book has a D, an ampersand, and a D on it, so it's official. These are the rules. Why aren't you honoring these rules? Why are you only honoring these rules? How do you handle a situation like that? Is that a situation where you just, again, say, I'm the DM, this is how we're playing, you're not doing that at the table? What would you do in that specific situation?
So what I do is, first off, I usually just neuter if I'm playing 5th edition. So that's, I don't play like Pathfinder or anything, or Pathfinder 2e. Those games, if you play Pathfinder 2e, you have to accept as a DM that the players are going to come with something ungodly. And that's just the way the game is written. But if I'm playing 5th edition, no feats, no multi-classing, because first off, the subclasses are already pretty much a multi-class anyway, because say if I'm going to be a rogue at 3rd level, I can become an arcane trickster. Tell me that's not a magic user / thief. You know what I mean? That's already that's already a multi-class. So go ahead and take out multi-class, and you take out feats, and then also you tell them that we're going to stay as strict as possible to the 3 core books. Unless you want to have Xanathar's I think is okay. In my opinion, Xanathar's didn't really add anything that was too broken. They really just kind of helped some stuff. But Tasha's, I've never even bought Tasha's. I actually stopped buying 5th edition books after Tomb of Annihilation. I largely think that the majority of the books after Xanathar's and Tomb of Annihilation were kind of bad. But yeah, so as a DM, what I say, actually, I just had this come up last Friday. The players are like, isn't there like more books that you can like use stuff out of? And I'm like, yeah, but we're only going to use the core 3. And they're like, okay. And they didn't question it. They're just like, okay, core 3, it is, So I think you have to be upfront about that and just say, this is what it's going to be. No feats, because the feats and the multi-classing in 5th edition are where they really start getting busted, where things really start. No variant human, because if you don't have feats, that's already gone. So that's pretty much it. Like, you just say, well, I'm going to stick to the rules as good as I can, and we're going to do these main books. And like you say, if you have Rules Cyclopedia, you have one book. You have OSC, you might just tell them Classic Fantasy or OSC Advanced, and that's pretty much it. But whenever you run the campaign, you say, we're going to run it rules is written using this one book or whatever, So
yeah, and I feel like for new players, that's actually makes things a lot easier. If you just say only stick to Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual, that's these are our books for all intents and purposes. for new players, that makes things a whole lot easier because all you have in the expanded rules and other splat books is just more options, more analysis paralysis for your new players. It really is a problem with experienced players who know all that stuff is out there, who own all those books. And I feel like for experienced players who have a problem with, we're going to play an 05R game, so just the 2014 books. It really is agree to that or find another table, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. You just say, "Hey, this is what we're doing," and then honestly, I think everything post Xanathars is pretty much it's. I've already said those books are bad, but if you stick to just the 2014 books, you can have and you say no feat. If you want feats, whatever. But if you say no feats, no multi classes, stick to the 2014 books, you're going to have a much more enjoyable game than you've had with 5th edition for a really long time, honestly. And it's kind of the running joke between me and Victor is that I used to make fun of him and Greg from Irish Chronicles.
Yep.
I used to make fun of those guys for being I used to call them alt sparkles. Yeah, instead of alt-right, alt-sparkles.
Yep.
And so it's kind of the joke that, like, I'm kind of defending 5th edition now because, like, I'm running it for the kids, and I've learned that if I take the structure that I've learned how to, I've learned how to craft the game a certain way, whereas, like, I'm not forcing story because I'm not trying to play a storytelling game. I'm playing a game. I'm not playing a storytelling game. If I learned how to play games from playing Rules Cyclopedia, Old School Essentials, Hyperborea, and played that rules as written, that's actually something I was getting to earlier. Playing Hyperborea rules as written, playing these other games rules as written, it taught me how to run a game differently. So then when I went back to 5th edition now, and I'm making these kids play the game, not how they see on YouTube, but how the game back during the era of Rule Cyclopedia was intended to be played, and I'm playing it that way now. 5th edition is very serviceable. However, the problem with 5th edition that I found is that the game itself, if you start there, it is never going to teach you how to run the game that way.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's going to teach you how to run it more like what you see on Critical Role and stuff like that. It's not going to teach you to run it the way that people were taught during the 2nd edition, 1st edition era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Crafty raises a good question, which I have a pithy answer to, but I do want to hear what your answer is to this. How do you fight the blanket comeback of why are you taking away my agency when you kind of lay down the law of these are the rules we're using at this table?
Well, basically that is just more like I'm running the game kind of thing. Like, I don't know, like I'm not, if it comes down to just saying, well, these are the rules that we're playing with, and you're like, well, that's taking away my agency. It's like, well, then your agency is not to play by the rules. Like,
yeah,
that's why I hang myself on the rules so much, is because that's my comeback. Is like, we're playing by the rules. Like, if you have a problem with playing by the rules, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
Yeah, I mean, I always lean on the door is that way. And, at the same time, if I say the door is that way and everyone gets up and walks out the door, then maybe I need to learn how to run my games better. But, usually in the situations where, you tell someone this is how we're playing, and if you don't like it, you don't have to play in this game, they're the only ones walking away from the table. So...
yeah, and it's interesting, Crafty's been in the chat, so it's really cool. He's a big read the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition kind of guy.
Yeah.
There is a lot of rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide that people don't use. A lot of people always talk about, like, the gritty realism and all that stuff. I don't even think that's necessarily where it's at. I think the big ones should be random encounters, morale checks, hirelings, loyalty checks with the hirelings, and then making people actually count encumbrance and use rations. And all that stuff I just said is just bare bones old school gaming, and the rules are in the book for 5th edition, but I rarely see, I mean, honestly, this is being just completely honest, 99% of the people I've talked to about 5th edition do not use encumbrance. They could care less about rations after a certain point. They definitely don't have hirelings. Anything I just said, they definitely don't do morale checks. They definitely don't do anything like that. Mm-hmm. They don't usually do random encounters. And if they do random encounters, air quotes, random encounters, they'll do a die roll and they'll have a forced encounter where they're like, okay, here is where the Banshee's going to come out and scare the people, and they might, whatever.
Yeah.
And so everything that I just mentioned, though, I used very heavily in my high school D&D game, and it's just been working very well. Like, we've had this whole thing where they became the captain of some goblins, and they went out and fought some hill giants with the goblins, and there's a big rivalry now, and the whole thing came about just from random happenstance, and the kids love it. So,
Yeah, Luau Lu in chat here makes a good point that there's kind of agency and suspense exist on a continuum with each other, where if you have your players have a bunch of agency, there's not going to be a lot of suspense because they can just kind of opt out of it. Whereas if you have a lot of suspense, a lot of excitement, your players might find themselves in situations where they're kind of helpless to, see what happens, but dealing with, the outcome of this thing that they might otherwise be helpless to stop will create something exciting where, once their agency comes back, they then have a new circumstance to deal with or something new to overcome. So I think a lot of players and GMs need to realize that, yes, sometimes your players won't have as much agency. We've already triggered Max Liao several times over by saying that word so many times, but there are going to be times where your player characters lack agency in the name of introducing a new complication to their lives as adventurers. And I think a lot of people just need to embrace that and, embrace the excitement that comes out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, this is kind of like sidestep of what you were just talking about. But for instance, since I was just mentioning it with the goblins and the hill giants, the players took over a hill giant cave that only had one hill giant in it, and it was a lady. They killed her husband that was like roaming about, and they tracked his tracks back to the cave. And she come out and she's like, I do a reaction roll. That's something I also do. I do reaction rolls in 5th edition that a lot of people don't do that stuff. And the reaction roll came up fairly positive. And so what they told to these giant lady, they have the helmet of comprehending languages and whatever. So what they told to her is that surrender or die. And I did a reaction roll, and it came up positive. So I told them that the lady says that she just wants to get her stuff, and then she has a baby inside and some pets, and she wants to leave. So she does that. But hill giants are inherently chaotic evil. So what the players do, they go in and they tell the goblins, stay here, we're going to go to town. Well, town is a day away. And also, I need to mention that they had 40 goblins. So it was like a whole army that they happened into. It was actually very cool. But they say, so you stay here because we know town don't like goblins. They obviously knew that they were monsters. They just happened to be loyal to death out of circumstances that I can't get into today. But they were loyal to death to the players.
Yeah.
And so they said, stay here. And so the goblins are like, aye, we'll stay here. Instantly leave after telling this hill giant that they're going to take over her cave. So they leave, they go to a day, and they're doing stuff in the city. Well, we play once a week. So during the week, I'm like, I'm going to do some rolls to see what happened while they were away from the cave. So I do some die rolls, and I say, did she go get her chaotic evil? Did she go get friends? Did she go get family? And it came up extremely yes. She went to go get friends and family. So the hill giants came back, and they absolutely massacred the goblins. And I rolled it out, and I have a dice roller on my phone, and there was a ton of dice being rolled, but they absolutely massacred these goblins. And some may say that took away some player agency. Maybe it wasn't directly toward the characters themselves, but they were definitely a part of they were loyal to the players, and they was definitely a big part of what the players thought they were going to be doing in the future. However, they had no say in what happened to the goblins, other than they just left them there at the cave because they didn't think that anybody was going to come back and massacre them. So some might say that took away their agency as far as storytelling goes, or whatever. They don't get to tell their story exactly how it happened, but stuff just happens sometimes where the dice fall where they are, and they left the goblins in the cave 1 hour after telling this other hill giant to evacuate. She went and got her friends, her hillbilly giant friends, and they came back in and just destroyed the place. So anyway, yes, I think, and then so now they're trying to figure out, do they enact revenge? What do they do? Yada yada. But see, it put them in a situation, much like you're saying, after they came back to the other side and they got their agency back. Now they're trying to figure out, how do we address the situation where these hill giants obviously just disrespected us, So.
Yeah, you're from Appalachia. I'm from adjacent to Appalachia. We know you don't mess with the hill folk. They'll come back with their relatives.
Exactly. So I did the roll, and then they came back. I mean, and if you've seen the pictures of the hill giants in the monster manual, like, good Lord, they look like some 2 a.m. Walmart people.
Yeah.
So.
No, Crafty actually brings up another question here. The joke or the meme around kind of the old school community is that it's so difficult to kill players in 5e, but you've managed to do it several times. So what's been your experience in killing player characters in 5e? Has it been relatively easy? Is it easier than people think it is? What's kind of your take on that?
My take is actually, now that we've been running this since fall, so I've had some months under my table doing this. We've had many character deaths. Actually, I just had a character death last Friday. My take is that a lot of people probably fudge rolls. They lean into challenge rating too much, to the point where they want a balanced. See, for one thing, I think balance is a false god. Basically, I don't guess that whole idea of balance with 5th edition that ruins a lot of stuff, and it puts too much pressure on the DM in general. That, like, if the DM feels like he has to balance everything, that no wonder all these people are getting burnt out and don't want to DM anymore.
Yeah. Because
the players, for one, they come to the table with an expectation that this is going to be a winnable fight. And I hate to tell you, that's what I tell kids. I do not run things balanced, and you're not supposed to win every fight. Like, it's a fight. You're going to lose. Maybe not every time. Maybe you win 9 out of 10 times, but you're that 1 out of 10 times, someone's probably going to get clapped, and you need to know when to leave. So for me, I think that DMs are listening to XP to level 3, and they just fudge HP. They fudge dice rolls. They set up cans. They put up cans in front of the players to get beat down. They basically pad the players' records. And to relate this back to MMA, they're padding the records with a bunch of losers, and that's why players don't die in 5th edition, is because the DMs have been almost brainwashed into running a game a certain way to make the players the Avengers. And, this player over here, she's Black Widow, and it's the Hulk, and whatever. And they all get their moment, and they're all superheroes and stuff. And what I've found is that, it's not just me, actually. There's 2 DMs. There's me and another guy. And this other guy, he's always been kind of a softy DM, but he has killed just as many people as I have. And that's because we just don't have a DM screen. We play by the rules, and the kids, they put themselves in situations they shouldn't be in, and they die sometimes. And that's just is what it is. Yeah. As long as you're actually playing the game, you're letting the die. Don't have a DM screen, because then you're like, that's kind of like a hot take. I don't like DM screens. But if you don't have one and you just roll in front of people, they can't fake it. They know they died. You can't. Right. You don't have to look down and look up and be like, I rolled a 20, and you feel so bad telling them and stuff, But no, you just roll in front of them, and they're like, oh, and then they blame the dice. They don't blame you. Right. You're just rolling hot today. You're always, that's what they end up saying. You always roll hot. So that's my opinion, is that people are just fudging too much, and they're basically fixing the fights. That's pretty much what it comes down to. That's my opinion. Yeah, you got a lot of Mike Jacksons and Dennis Sievers on there. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, in my opinion,
it is hard to kill player characters in 5e, but specifically it's hard to kill player characters in 5e once you get to level 10 and beyond. Yeah. That's when it's really hard to kill player characters. But before then, like you said, it's just a matter of actually challenging them and not worrying so much about balance, because balance is stupid.
So I'm with you actually on that. I should have mentioned that, obviously we're on low levels. But the death save mechanics in 5th edition are pretty lenient. I mean, worst case scenario, someone rolls a 1 and then it's like it takes 2 rounds. Like worst case scenario, they failed 1 and they roll a 1 and then they're dead.
Yeah.
That's worst case scenario. So at bare minimum, they got 2 rounds of bleed out. And then, sometimes it's like, there's so much healing magic in 5th edition as well. It's like so easy just to have someone to do like a healing word or something and boop, they're back up. So most of it's that. I mean, because if you go to like Rule Cyclopedia, there's 2 ways to do death in Rule Cyclopedia. There's death at 0, just flat out, or you got a death versus save versus death. It just once. And so that's that's a different way to do things. In 1st edition, you go to -10, so it doesn't matter if you have 30 health. If you're fighting something and you have 5 health and you get smacked for 15, you're dead.
Yeah.
So 5th edition's death save is definitely super forgiving. But I have found that like if it is a challenging encounter and it's like a randomly rolled encounter where there's a lot of bodies, that the players don't have time to like take focus from fighting this one thing off to go heal somebody real quick, because there's like 3 bad guys and there's only 3 guys left and they're all getting smacked and they don't really have time. So there's been multiple occasions at the low level 5th edition game that I'm playing where everybody at the table is making death saves. And that's a wild moment because I'm just like going around like, Oprah, you do a death save, and it's just like everybody's doing death saves. So I think that at high level, yes, it's ridiculous, but at low level, it is very over exaggerated how hard it is to kill 5th edition players.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are kind of running up against the end of our time here, and there's one more question that I have to get the answer to from you, because everyone gets asked this when they come on Rollin' Bones. So, Crossface, if you could put anything on a t-shirt, what would it be?
Oh, man. So it's strange. I'm wearing my double wrist lock t-shirt right now. One of my friends, he's like a 3rd degree black belt that's doing like a double wrist lock suplex. Something like that. It's hard because I'm not a t-shirt guy. You know what? It would probably be something. This might be a little controversial. I'd probably be something like a Chris Benoit t-shirt, because you don't see those anymore. Give me a Chris Benoit t-shirt. Give me like a Toothless Aggression t-shirt and I'm good.
Oh God. Oh, I can only imagine what like wearing that in public would be, because the majority of people, even after everything that happened, the majority of the people would not recognize Chris Benoit's face. Mm-hmm. But you'll have the people that do because of the crimes they committed, or the crime that he committed, and you'll have the people that do because they're wrestling fans who are also aware of the crime that he committed, and the reactions you'll get from those people.
He's still my favorite wrestler. It's really him and Eddie Guerrero, man. Both were iconic. So
yeah, absolutely, man. I almost want to just like, and not even like put his name on it, just like the face of Chris Benoit on a t-shirt and see how people react to it.
Yeah, what I want is kind of like him just doing like some cutthroat and just give the silhouette of like a cutthroat, and that's what I want.
Oh, good God. When you go back and like watch really any show or pay-per-view or anything that Benoit was on, and you hear the way the commentary talks about him in light of what he ended up doing, it's unintentionally funny, I think is the best way to put it.
It's rough. It's hard. I can't really watch the commentary, actually. That's one thing I can't watch, but I can watch the match. He's still very good. He's a heck of a worker.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cool. Well, unfortunately, that's it for our time. I definitely want to bring you back on specifically. Next time you come on here, I want to talk all about Rule Cyclopedia.
For sure.
That's one of your areas of expertise, and I have learned a lot from you, specifically posting about it. So
So this I mean, I don't know when I'm going to be back on, but this summer specifically, after the club is done, I intend to try to corral some online friends and real life friends into a Discord where we're going to just, the whole goal for the summer is just to run Rule Cyclopedia as close to rules as written as possible, and just have a big group of people. So I might have more, depending on when I'm back on to talk about Rule Cyclopedia. I might have more to talk about. I haven't got to play it enough yet to really consider myself an expert on it, but I have done some deep dives on the game itself. So yeah, for sure, I do want to talk about that.
I will be mindful of your schedule as far as playing Rule Cyclopedia to make sure that you have plenty of ammunition for that conversation.
Cool deal. Appreciate it.
All right, well, guys, that's going to do it for Rollin' Bones this evening. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was great getting to talk to you actually face-to-face, not just through Gilded. So, I really enjoyed kind of, talking to you about this tonight. Next week, things are going to be a little bit different. John Page, the composer of my theme music, great musician, great composer, and now comic book writer, John Page, is going to be on Rollin' Bones. We're going to talk a little bit about role-playing games, but really, in particular, we're going to talk about alternate media, creativity, and essentially creating parallel media to that which is popular and, heavily corporatized and stuff like that. So it's going to be kind of an abstract conversation in relation to role-playing games, but we're definitely going to talk about RPGs in that conversation. So next week, John Page and I will be talking about alternate media and creative energy. Hope you guys will join us, and until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I will see you guys next time.